pitched that concept to George a few years ago, the idea of buying Lucasfilm, and I promised him that we'd respect the legacy.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them.
At the same time, those people who may not play by the rules because they're selfish and greedy turn themselves into evil people who don't care about other people.
There you go.
Nerdrotic.com.
As we approach the end of the Rey saga, the word being associated to Disney Star Wars by the Access media is fear. Is Disney Star Wars scared? Are they scared that Star Wars is over? And we need to discuss what Bob Iger did and did not talk about and those Doomcock rumors. My apologies for starting the video like this, but if you could please consider subscribing to the channel. YouTube is going to be making some major changes on January 1st that are going to greatly affect independent creators here on YouTube. If you could like and share the videos as well, that would help me and your favorite YouTuber stay competitive against the giant corporations that YouTube is still prioritizing. Now on to the video. Disney Star Wars is indeed worried about the Rise of Skywalker, and it's obvious enough that Variety is writing articles like The Force that's now driving Star Wars fear. We have the obvious stuff out there. The merchandise just isn't selling, no matter what anybody says. The attendance is flat at Galaxy's Edge, no matter what the excuses. And yes, we heard them all at Bob Iger's Q4 earnings call, where he said Star Wars films are going on hiatus last night. And of course, this is my opinion, but take it to the bank. Rian Johnson is done with Disney Star Wars. Maybe a producer credit, but he will not be directing 3 films.
So, eventually you have to trust Ryan.
We also heard the same thing about Benioff and Weiss, and as you saw in my introduction, these people lie all the time, so you can't take what they say at face value. Like when the Access media came out in defense of J.J. Abrams, there have been a ton of reports, and not just from trolls on YouTube, that there have been problems with the Rise of Skywalker. Allow me to give you a brief example from Wired magazine. Is the Rise of Skywalker being written at the last minute? The source: the initial rumor comes from trolls. The rebuttal from J.J. Abrams himself. The reason we mention all of this is because simply it's not true. Director J.J. Abrams is on the record as saying that the last sequence in the movie was decided early on in the filmmaking process. Well, there it is. It's absolutely settled. J.J. Abrams never, ever, ever lies. Oh, wait a minute. If you're a Star Trek fan, you might remember one big fat lie that he and Alex Kurtzman were telling over and over again about Into Darkness. This is something I need to remind a lot of the Star Wars fans out there and Disney Star Wars fans. A lot of us Star Trek fans have already had plenty of experience with Jar Jar Abrams, and we have been trying to warn you for quite some time. The same thing is coming for Disney Star Wars. Again, it has been reported by Access media sources, so take that for what it's worth, that the ending of Rise of Skywalker had been changed during production. And I did find it interesting in the Bloomberg article that came out today talking to Bob Iger, Rise of Skywalker wasn't mentioned once in the article. Not once. Iger did say this, though. Iger concedes he may have misjudged the public's appetite for such spin-offs. No, you have misjudged the public's appetite for spin, Bob. There didn't seem like there was much demand for another standalone Star Wars movie, complete baloney sausage, as our friend Jeremy says. He says, but despite Solo, which made $394 million at the box office, which isn't that great for a billion-dollar franchise, he's certain The Mandalorian will be huge. It's cool, he says. It's the first live-action Star Wars television that's ever been done. Now, that's not exactly true, is it? How could we forget the Star Wars holiday special? If nothing else, it may have won over one famously hard-to-please observer, creator George Lucas, who was unhappy with The Force Awakens. Welcome to the Phantom Menace, George. Disney's first depiction of his universe and its inhabitants. Lucas visited the Mandalorian set and hasn't complained, at least not publicly. George has been fine, Iger says. Lucas didn't reply to the request for comment. Let's rewind a little bit here. Did they just say, if nothing else, it may have won over a famously hard-to-please observer, creator George Lucas? And then he said, George has been fine. There's no real comment there. Bloomberg, come on. It's Jesus Christ, the access media. They are too much. You'll wonder why YouTube channels grow by the day. Thank you for subscribing, by the way. Quick question out there, audience. For those of you in long-term relationships with a boy, a girl, a robot, if you're Lando Calrissian, if you ask them, hey, how you doing? And they respond back, fine. Is that good? Now to those Doomcock rumors. I will link the video in the description. I'm not going to report all of them because there was a lot, and we do need to emphasize the word rumor on that one. You can believe what you want. I am not a news source. Doomcock is not a news source. We are just a couple of fans talking about some scuttlebutt. Definitely not official news. I hope I've made myself clear on that one. So, a couple of his rumors talked about poor test screenings. Now, I've heard this too. I think a lot of people have heard this. We've heard this from a lot of people for a long time. I don't know whether this is true or not. I have no way of confirming it, but it certainly looks like to me through the access media that there is a lot of problems with this film. Again, J.J. Abrams came out in August and said, no, the ending is the end. It hasn't changed. I think I've proven to you that J.J. might not tell the truth. Plus, other people don't tell the truth within Star Wars. It's kind of like sports ball when your general manager is always lying to you about signing a player. Same thing here. And I want you to remember one thing. Remember Solo. Remember that Solo was, depending on reports, 70 to 90% shot before they fired the directors. Imagine if you hadn't heard that as official news. Imagine if you had heard that as a rumor. What would you think? It would sound utterly ridiculous. Who in the hell would do that? Who would fire Lord and Miller 90% into the film and still have a job? But it really did happen.
But that's the difference here. In the old days, there was an overall outline. This one's more like a relay race where the first guy runs the race and hands the torch off. And then, the same with Ryan. Whoever, or JJ now is going to take Ryan's story and figure it all out.
Now, it has been reported far and wide that they have been making up the new Disney Star Wars trilogy as they went along. And yes, Doomcock did say a lot of other things in his video. You can watch it in the video. I want to stick to the test screenings because these are things I know happens in Hollywood. And I think it's pretty clear that they have done this in some way. As Doomcock said in his video, I'm not so sure. But I do support Doomcock in all things and his right to say whatever the hell he wants in his videos because it's his platform and I am not the YouTube police and neither is anyone else. But we get back to this. I think they want to turn the page as quickly as possible. I think the thing is testing badly, and I think they've lost a lot of the plot. Literally. And I think The Mandalorian dropping in November was a happy accident because they know The Rise of Skywalker is going to be a giant disaster. You know how I know this? Well, I did a video on Star Trek Picard a few months back calling it a failure before it even starts because it requires a comic book to understand what's going on in the television show. They couldn't tell a complete story within 10 episodes. Well, the same thing is happening with Rise of Skywalker. What's the commonality between those two things? Well, it's Jar Jar Abrams' bad reboot, secret hideout, and his protege Alex Kurtzman. Remember, Jake Skywalker was teaching some young Padawans before he had a bad dream and tried to kill his nephew, Krylo. What happened to those kids? Well, we find out in a comic book. Do you want to know what happens between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, and you want to know how quickly they're turning that page? Well, there's some required reading. The Resistance Reborn. The new novel, Resistance Reborn, is essential reading for The Rise of Skywalker. This week's release of Star Wars Resistance Reborn, a new novel by Rebecca Roanhorse that takes place between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, is something for Star Wars fans to celebrate, given that it acts as an important bridge between the movies and as a signpost as to where Star Wars is as a franchise right now. For fans of the property, yes, that's how Disney looks at it. That's how the access media looks at it. And quite frankly, that's how I look at it now. especially those who follow material outside of the core movies, which is pretty much all the substance, all the context that we require because these stories are so hollow. Resistance Reborn is close to invaluable beyond the fun of introducing, or in many cases reintroducing, characters with connections to multiple eras of the property. From the original trilogy through Star Wars Rebels, the Aftermath series of novels, and who could forget that Aftermath novel by Chuck Wendig, it serves a number of very specific narrative purposes that the films could not do, that in many ways feel necessary for the larger Star Wars story as a whole. I think there's little doubt that there's a major course correction again going on at Disney Star Wars. George Lucas handed it over to Kathleen Kennedy, and the Kathleen Kennedy era is ending with the Rise of Skywalker, and we are entering the Bob Iger Star Wars era. And if you want some evidence towards that, well, again, we go back to the Bloomberg article where he states he has creative control over The Mandalorian. Now, Bob Iger might have had creative control over everything. I don't know this, but this is the first I have heard. And I imagine getting notes from your CEO is a little intimidating. I've probably seen each episode of The Mandalorian 3 times, Iger says. First, to give some notes. Second, to see the rough cut and the impact of those notes. So if Bob Iger has creative control over The Mandalorian, I'm guessing he might have some over The Rise of Skywalker, as Doomcock alluded to in his video. There has been no shortage of reports and rumors on The Rise of Skywalker, and there's little doubt to me that this thing is going to be a total disaster, and there is no doubt to me that Disney Star Wars lies, and the access media is smelling a little blood in the water, and I'm sensing that there's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking coming pretty soon, probably the day after The Rise of Skywalker comes out. And this brings us back to the Variety column. Is Disney Star Wars in fear? Is Disney Star Wars over? And I don't mean over in the literal sense. I mean, is Disney Star Wars done as the big dog franchise? Yes, and I think it has been for quite some time. And again, I think the access media is starting to figure that out while still missing the main point. Over isn't a word that anyone at Disney wants to hear or utter in connection with the Star Wars universe. It's not just that the studio wants to keep its space opera cash cow going. Who wouldn't? It's that what Star Wars has come to represent is a kind of capitalist religion. It's the very definition of capitalist, just like Variety, the organization that you're writing for. The notion that Hollywood can create a universe that's so powerful, such a golden goose, that it never has to end. And it didn't need to end, but they decided that filling their films full of agenda and drinking those fat boy tears was a priority over actually having a completely successful film, not just financially. But what does that mean now that the extended saga of Luke Skywalker is nearing its completion and total collapse? The fear of making a mistake, of inventing the next age of Star Wars only to see the universe fall off a cliff, cannot be overstated. That fear is immense. Billions and billions of dollars are on the table, yet it's more than just the money. What's at stake is a belief system that the Phantom Menace has rocked, I might add. The philosophy that has ruled not just Disney, but Hollywood for 4 decades. The one that says shoot the moon, and when you hit it, repeat and repeat and repeat again. And when in doubt, don't just shoot the moon, build the moon. Build a universe. That's how you control the universe. And that's certainly what Disney's been doing in reality. No wonder there's so much antsy trigger finger indecision. And that's been the legacy of Kathleen Kennedy and Disney Star Wars. When it comes to the pivot point that Star Wars is fast approaching, post Episode 9, the rulers of the franchise must now rise to the executive equivalent of playing God. They have to figure out how to see the future and say, let there be hits.
It's a very big universe I've created, and there's a lot of stories that are sitting in there.
The beauty of the collaboration that can continue.
So I was led to believe that I still had the Force.
Ultimately, Disney Star Wars' fate will be decided by the fans, and that is why Disney Star Wars is scared. Certainly, there's going to be a bunch of them still around, but it is no longer the top dog franchise, and Disney Star Wars knows it. That's why there's a major course correction in process as we speak. And Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy have themselves to blame. You know, you really did enjoy making a living off of those fanboy tears, but eventually those fanboys, you know, the ones who kept Star Wars alive for decades, walk away and you end up dying of thirst. I have and will never have a problem with anybody liking something. If you like The Last Jedi, bless your heart. But I have no problem calling out the repurposers who have split my beloved fandom and used it and the franchises as a platform for their brand of identity politics. And I have no problem going after the bankers in charge of our beloved franchises, you know, the type of people who make bubble charts like this. You know, the kind of people who would greenlight a decision like bringing back Emperor Palpatine out of nowhere, undoing Luke and Anakin's sacrifice just to squeeze the turnip of nostalgia to get some fanboy blood out of it. While there is plenty of red flags out there pointing to the direction of Disney Star Wars being a total disaster, there is no way we can prove the rumors or conjecture or hearsay, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it, and it doesn't mean I'm not going to talk about it, and I will continue talking about it. Now, will The Mandalorian heal everything? I don't think so, but it does look like a good TV show, one that I will be covering live after every episode, so please check in here. That's something I've done with a lot of TV shows, and I will be discussing it with my co-host Dictor Van Doomcock on The Inquisition this Sunday, so please be sure to tune in. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, well, thank you for listening this long. Disney Star Wars' reckoning is coming, and have a great day.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.